The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
If you want to get the show on your iPhone or Android phone, make sure you have the Stitcher application. You can put promo code David in. You'll be entered to win $100. You'll get the show in your favorites list. What else is on your Stitcher favorites, Louis? Oh, that's right. Your phone's 10 years old, and it has one line of individual pixelated text, right?
Mm-hmm.
When are you getting a new phone, anyway?
Dave, it's not looking good.
You're keeping that. You're sticking with that thing.
Yeah, I think until it basically disintegrates in my hand when I pick it up,
right.
I will be using this thing.
Well, there's been yet another isolated incident of right-wing potential plotted terror, domestic terrorism. And you know, Louis, every time that there's an incident of right-wing terror or a planned incident of right-wing terror, it's always completely unconnected from anything else. It's always a lone wolf acting completely alone, and we can separate it completely from society and the realities of this world.
Right.
It has nothing to do with it.
Mm-hmm.
Now, even though I know that, I'm putting up this map for you here. This is a map dating back to 2008. It's missing the last 6 months. This is the map we put up 6 months ago that a lot of people wanted to see, pointing out incidents of right-wing terror in the United States. And as you can see, Louis, they're very, very isolated. I mean, some of these are far away from each other, and they clearly don't represent any kind of trend, like, for example, American Muslims, which require hearings from Peter King. That's a trend. These, completely unrelated, not worth any level of introspection.
Of course, that makes perfect sense.
We know that Peter King and Bill O'Reilly and their ilk believe the only real domestic terrorism threat that Americans face is from radical Islam, right? And the followers of radical Islam, people who have become radicalized, often in countries in the Middle East. They've often grown long beards. They've taken Muslim names. We're very familiar with that narrative, aren't we?
Yeah, at least here on the show we are.
And if you watch Bill O'Reilly or you listen to Peter King, you're pretty familiar with it too. So we can expect a blind eye to be turned when there's another case of right-wing domestic terrorism, and this time it's basically the same thing. There has been almost no mainstream media coverage of the fact that the Atlanta Journal-Constitution reported 4 North Georgia men were accused of being members of this fringe militia group. They were arrested by feds. They were planning to make the deadly toxin ricin and also obtain explosives. That's a boring story, Louis, right? Because they're not Muslim. They're just Americans. They're just Americans from Georgia.
Guess so. It's a story that a lot of Americans don't want to hear.
At one meeting, investigators say one of the men, Frederick Thomas, created a bucket list of government employees, politicians, and corporate leaders that he felt needed to be taken out. He said, "I've been to war and I've taken life before, and I can do it again," he said to an undercover investigator. Of course, all allegedly, according to the records. Thomas's wife, though, Charlotte, she says the charges are baloney.
Mm-hmm. Right. We'll see about that.
Rest assured. Charlotte Thomas told us, Louis, the charges are baseless.
Well, we might as well just throw out all the charges then and let these men free, right?
Might as well.
So.
Prosecutors said another of the men discussed making 10 pounds of ricin and dispersing it in Atlanta and a bunch of other cities across the country. And Adams, which is another of the men, is accused of showing Crump the formula to make ricin and telling him how to make the ingredients. This, again, seems like one of these pretty clear cases that why isn't this being discussed? It's a very, very clear case. It's not a Muslim guy with a name similar to someone on the terror watch list being taken and interrogated at a CIA black site in Libya and then being dropped off on the streets of Austria to find his way home. Very ambiguous, not clear what is going on, right? This is a pretty clear story. Nobody seems to care. Is it just because the guys aren't Muslim? There has to be something else, right? I mean, Natan, why else don't these stories make it?
Even some stories involving Muslims where they're planning something, perhaps even something on a smaller scale. I mean, they are discussed, but it's just not much. It's negligible.
Why doesn't this get picked up? Is it only because
because they didn't successfully carry out the attack?
Hold on a second. I'm trying to get Natan's opinion.
I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Natan. Why isn't this getting more mainstream coverage? Any of these stories?
I have no idea. I mean, I think that the case of Muslim terrorism serves a purpose that certain people want to, like Peter King, want to espouse. But
right.
I have no explanation for why these types of things aren't covered.
The other question that comes up is if we need to hold hearings on the threat of domestic terrorism, Why doesn't it include the most prolific domestic terrorists, right? Right-wing extremists. What will it take? How many people, we've asked this before, and we don't really have the answer. How many people need to die from domestic right-wing terror before we're going to take it seriously, before Peter King will say, let's have a hearing?
Right. Well, the thing is, these plots are being foiled before any actual attacks happen. I mean,
Not always.
Not you. Most of the time, right? Most of the time. I mean, imagine if
Plenty of
a large amount of ricin were dumped in some water supply for a major city.
Okay, the ricin thing has been avoided. The biological warfare has, but there have been countless shootings, Arkansas, Arizona. I mean, they're all over. They're
Right.
constantly happening. Those aren't being avoided.
No. But if there were something like that, if something like that did happen, and there were countless deaths as the result of it, I mean, maybe maybe then there would be some type of talk about it.
Similar to with Occupy Wall Street, Lewis believes the real point at which this is going to go to the next level of people paying attention is when a cop dies with Occupy Wall Street, or when a lot of people die from biological warfare when it comes to right-wing terror.
Probably.